Welcome to Dark City on the Dark Matter Digital Network, WABC Radio, and a growing list of terrestrial radio affiliates. 107.7 in New Orleans, 105.3 on the Gulf Coast, and maybe more coming very soon. My name is Steve Warner. We have a show for you tonight that is... God, I don't even know where to start with this. I got a Twitter message from somebody the other day saying, you got to have Mark Sargent on. And I thought, I haven't heard of Mark Sargent before, but of course I'll take a look. And his website is enclosedworld.com. And well... Mark, is that you chuckling in the background there?
It is.
Oh boy. Here's how this happened. A month or two ago, my producer and I were going through possible topics, and she came across flat earthers. And I had a good laugh about it, and I thought, okay, yeah, that's something different. We could maybe do that. And I didn't think about it for a while. Well, once I got onto your website, not only is it in that realm, it takes it sort of to the next level. And my understanding is you've actually caught flack from the flat earthers who are saying that Mark Sargent, well, they've said a whole bunch of different things about you, but I guess you have spent the better part of the last year telling everybody who will listen about this theory that you and others have developed, and that is that the world, the earth that we reside on, is not actually a globe. Tell me a little bit first about who Mark Sargent is and how you came across what has to be the wildest conspiracy theory that exists on the internet, and that is a hell of a feat. To have that distinction, the wildest conspiracy theory on the internet, that's quite a thing. Yeah, it is. It's the most ridiculous. Again, for those who are listening, I can guarantee there's only a certain series of reactions you're going to have. You're going to brace against this, though, in some way. You're either going to roll your eyes and look at the radio and go, oh, my God. You're going to laugh, or you're going to get slightly angry for this even being discussed on the show. And I was like you. A year ago, last summer, well, back up a little bit, I started out as a game developer years and years ago. I played games professionally, actually, computer games for a living when I first came to Boulder, Colorado, and then taught proprietary software for years and years for various startup companies here in Boulder. And so I knew how to break something down, especially how to simplify it. I could take an advanced concept and do a classroom training on it. And make it very, very easy to digest. And I had gone through just about, every conspiracy you could think of up until last year, to the, every one you could think of that you guys are rattling off in your heads. I've seen it. And to the point where I was looking for something new, something, so it's like, all right, what, and Flat Earth had come across my desk so many times, and I had just brushed it aside. I thought, it's crap, it's junk. I'm never, ever going to look at this thing seriously. And then one day, sometime last year, I was on YouTube, and I happened to catch a German guy's video. It was all in German, but I could understand kind of what he was saying that, look, there's something wrong with the planes in the southern hemisphere. They look screwy. The routes are funny. They don't make sense. I've gone, okay, all right, that's kind of interesting. And then one of the related videos was a video by a guy named Matt Boylan, a Canadian artist who claimed he had worked for NASA at some point doing artistic renderings for various backdrops and planetary things.
and that he was told by NASA at some point during his very, very short career there that the world was not what we think it. There wasn't a globe, that it was way more flat than it was a globe. And I go, okay, interesting story, really, actually, science fiction story, pretty cool. Could make a great Twilight Zone episode. And I decided I was going to try to debunk this thing because why not? I figured I could crank this thing out in a weekend. And I sat down and I tried to basically debunk flat Earth. Started last summer, and the more I looked at it, the worse it got for me. It was like a Pandora's box in a plain brown wrapper, where everything that I pulled on, every time I went down a certain path, it didn't end up into a dead end. The roads kept forking into other roads. And before the end of the year, I started realizing that I was never going to debunk flat Earth, so I took a different track, and I said, okay, all I have to do is prove the globe, something that actually just proves the globe once and for all. And I couldn't do it, to where I got so frustrated that, and then I had that weird Jerry Maguire moment, second week of February of this year, where I woke up and I literally had from point A to Z in my head. I had the narrative in my head. And I sat down and I cranked out the intro and the first 7 clues in 8 days. One after another. Everything straight from script to finished thing, put it out on the internet, and basically challenged the internet back in February. I said, okay, show me it's a globe. Somebody show me. And I did everything to lower what's the word I'm looking for here? To lower the profile of this thing. So I didn't turn on comments. I didn't turn on ratings. I didn't monetize it. Any way, shape, or form, I made it as low-key as possible. And by the time I had done clue 7, the phone calls started coming in, and the emails started coming in, where people were asking me questions like, is this real? Is this actually happening? And then, and I ended every video with the same catch, which was not only my phone number and my name, but I also said, look, do your own research, ask questions, figure this thing out for yourself. And people really latched onto it, and they built a whole bunch of stuff based off of the clues that I was releasing. And they were asking the same questions, like, all right, prove it's a globe. Somebody out there, prove it's a globe. And here we are in July, and it hasn't been proven yet. There has been no magic bullet, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger to the point where I get calls every single day. I get interviews every single week, and people want to know is the theory correct? Are we living in a Truman Show, thousands of miles wide? And my opinion at this point is like, well, not only is it possible, it's likely that we've been fooled, and that the authority is the governments of the world, at the highest levels have known about it since about 1956, 1957, and it is the biggest, weirdest conspiracy of all time, and I am humbled to have even stumbled upon it.
Well, when you say you can't prove that the Earth is a globe, I mean, there's about 5 questions that should come from that. If you've got a beach ball, let's say, and you put an ant on the beach ball, the ant is still going to know that this thing is spherical. But if you make the sphere big enough, at some point the ant thinks it's on level ground, and it is on level ground.
Yeah.
And also, you get high enough above the Earth, you can see the curvature of the Earth, can you not?
Oh, you would think so. And that, in fact, that is one of the big sticking points that has been put out there. It's like, well, lots of people say, well, we can see the curvature from an airplane, or we can see the curvature from this, and I go, okay, show me how you can do it. I go, the first time you can see a curvature, you take a picture of it, you take that picture home, put it on your computer, put a piece of paper or a ruler up to it, tell me if you see the curve. And you won't see it. As a matter of fact, the weather balloon tests that were done recently, I'll give you a comparison. There's a picture on my machine which I love sending to people. One was done by the Red Bull team, which got major media attention, because it's Red Bull, where they went up to about 128,000 feet, which is about as high as you can go on a weather balloon without that thing really blowing. And using a wide angle or fisheye lens, they had like 4 or 5 cameras, but the ones that they really showed to the media had a severe curvature to the Earth. Way more exaggerated. Because even at 128,000 feet, which is what 20-something miles, you can't. The curve wouldn't be that great. Contrast that to the DOGCAM, D-O-G-C-A-M video footage that was from the UK, which was done only a few months earlier at about 110, 112,000 feet. And their camera shows an absolutely perfect straight line at 112,000 feet, which means you can absolutely not see a curve from a plane. Anyone that thinks they can, again, take the picture and show me. And there are so many people since this thing has started up this year have been doing curvature tests. Amazing stuff like the Chicago skyline test that was done recently, where the Chicago skyline, over the one of the Great Lakes, is 50-something miles from the opposite shore at one of its greatest points, which means if you're using standard curvature stuff, it should be about 1,700 feet below. And you can still see the entire skyline. And the weatherman, it was a story just this year. The weatherman comes on and goes, oh, it's a mirage. You can't actually see the skyline. You're staring right at it. It's perfectly straight. It's not wavering. It's not leaning back. All the lights are on. The curvature's not there. I challenge anybody to go on YouTube and find me a video that actually shows the curvature.
Well, you would have to take into consideration ISS photographs and video footage, would you not? And also,
the ISS. They're having a really, really tough time. And that's another great video. Everyone wants to have some fun. Look up on YouTube. All you have to do is type in 2 words: ISS hoax. Is there something flying up there? Yeah, you can see something from the ground. I've seen something myself. Are there people up there? You're going to have to watch ISS hoax and look for yourself, because the footage, the interior footage of the astronauts, and remember, these are just Air Force employees that are supposedly inside the ISS, the footage, the production footage that's coming out of there is atrocious. It's so bad at some points I was staring at it wondering if they want to get caught. Because even B teams, the B units in Hollywood, be able to produce better stuff than what they're doing out of there. So, do I believe there's people in the ISS? No, not a chance. Not a chance. If you can watch the ISS hoax videos on YouTube and then come back and say, "Oh yeah, I totally believe they're up there," well, then I feel bad.
All right. Well, I'll put that video up. I've not watched that. I went through your whole series, which is Flat Earth Clues on YouTube, and it's interesting. There are some. I think there is suspension of disbelief that one has to do to buy into every point, and a big sticking point, in my opinion, is what you would call the NASA fraud. That they have been engaged in fraud since day one. I want to come back to that in a minute. You're listening to Mark Sargent. We're talking about the mother of all conspiracy theories. Talk about the people who would have to be involved to cover up something like this next on Dark City. All right, welcome back. You're listening to Dark City with Mark Sargent. So you don't believe there's anybody up in the ISS. Do you believe there is a craft up there at 120-something? Well, I guess it would be higher than that. If there is something floating around, and I think it would be between 200 and 400 miles up, depending on who you ask. Is there some craft flying up there? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I go out with night vision. I'm out here in Colorado. I go out with night vision binoculars, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff flying around up there. Do I think it's us? Do I think even most of it's us? No, I don't. But I'll throw one more thing at you, and that is, when it comes to astronauts, no, I don't believe any astronaut's been put on the top of a rocket ever. In fact, look at the story that came out late last year or first part of this year. It's intriguing. I dare anybody to read it and think otherwise, which was the Challenger disaster of 1986. Somebody released an article that says, oh, yeah, by the way, the Challenger astronauts appear to still be alive. Here's where they are now. And it compares the photos, their professions, their ages are about right. The names haven't changed. 2 of them apparently claim to be twin brothers of the people that were supposedly died in the crash, back then. But
No, I don't think for a second that we have anybody above a certain altitude right now.
Well, this would be a very, very elaborate fraud that's been going on for 50 plus years. You're talking about involving NASA, JPL, all of the contractors, thousands upon thousands of employees that are engaged in elaborate theater.
Yes.
To make people believe that we have done these things. Wouldn't it have just been easier if you're saying, well, do you believe that we have technology that could escape Earth's atmosphere? Tell me exactly. Please break down for me
how it happened.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. The break. Yeah. Really, what happened? Okay. I'll start with a question, and that is we'll go back in the Wayback Machine, and that was 500 years ago. The theory was put out. Up until about 500 years ago, we thought the Earth was flat. All cultures, all religions, all governments. That's what everybody thought. And then 500 years ago, Copernicus and others suggested that it was a globe, using some very bold math and some huge leaps of faith. But unfortunately, that was 500 years ago. There was literally no way to prove it. You didn't have hot air balloons until like 1760. That was another couple hundred years. You didn't have the first planes until 1900, and then you didn't have anything. You didn't have pressurized cabins until what, the 1950s? Yeah. Let's say, for example, at that point you still couldn't prove it. You had to have a vehicle that could go high enough to take the picture that shows you exactly what the world looks like. Let's say you finally get a rocket going up in about 1957 or 1958, and you find out the Earth isn't exactly what it looks like, what you've been telling people, what the globes in the classrooms ever since you've been 6 years old for generation after generation. Would you tell the public? That's the big question there. Would you tell them? Because it would be such a massive shock to the system. So,
well, there have been paradigm shifts before. I mean, I imagine there was some degree of uncertainty about Copernicus's idea when he presented the globe theory, and that's happened with. Look, people adapt. People
they do, but things move a lot faster now. And granted, they probably would have been better off if they would have told people in the 50s, because things aren't as fast, they aren't as instant as they are now. So the decision, I think, I'm kind of on the fence on why they did. I know they did it for our own good, because it's like, okay, this is going to cause a huge upheaval, both economically and spiritually, and it's going to be a big mess, and it'll take us decades, to kind of restructure things. So, but to get more on point, at that point, once they find out that the Earth isn't what they think it is, they've got a real problem on their hands. And one of the first things they've got to do is they've got to militarize space. They've got to make sure that private corporations do not get involved in the space program. And so NASA was formed in 1958, right after the rocket programs were done, and about the exact same time that they were doing high-altitude atomic testing. Russia and the Americans, they did that for 4 years, firing nukes straight up. No one really said why. NASA's formed in 1958, and it started out fairly small. I mean, yeah, it's the biggest con of all time, but like everything, it has small beginnings. And the money that they were spending in the beginning and the research involved, it took some time to develop, but the most important was they were on the ground, or play on words there, they were the ones that started it, so they controlled access to space. And they held on to it for as long as they could. So the Apollo stuff started up in the late 60s, and then they made the moon missions. Even though, we all thought that we were going to have flying cars like the Jetsons, they really downplayed the moon thing. And I'll throw one more out at you. Here's a fun one. I'm still waiting for NASA to answer this one for me on a round table, and that is the Van Allen radiation belts, announced in 1959. The deadliest thing to us ever, these massive bands supposedly of radiation that would kill any human. And yet the only shielding that's available to us, even today, the two common elements are lead and gold. Well, there's a problem there, and they're very, very heavy. And so you can't put them on top of a capsule. You can't put them in spacesuits. We use them at the dentist's office, but that's about it. But you still fly Apollo 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 round trips with people, round trips, that's twice, to the moon and back, supposedly, through these Van Allen radiation belts with no shielding whatsoever. No one comes back with radiation poisoning. Nobody gets cancer. The capsules aren't contaminated. NASA just glossed over it. They shot themselves in the foot in '59 by even announcing it. They got ahead of themselves, like, oh, okay, we'll work through that problem. And they still never have. And again, if anybody has any doubts, look at the Orion program that's going on now, where NASA literally says on video, it's like, oh yeah, we're still working on how to deal with the Van Allen radiation belts. That was last year. What are you talking about? What do you mean deal with it? You dealt with it, back in the '60s. What are you not doing now? So, yeah, well, it's a fraud since day one.
Isn't the argument that the astronauts just didn't spend enough time in the Van Allen radiation belt to be able to suffer the effects of it?
No. Oh God, no. I mean, those things. The Van Allen radiation belts are huge. If you believe what they say. And without shielding at all, I mean, people can go down into the Smithsonian and look, or the Air and Space Museum, and look at the capsules themselves. There's no shielding on these things. At the very least, they would have, several of those astronauts would have come up with some form of cancer. No question. It has nothing to do with the length of time. In fact, some of the astronauts on air said, questioned that they even had to deal with them at all. And if they didn't have to deal with them, then why is Orion even talking about them? And, Orion's last year's program. In fact, they haven't even finished the Orion project yet.
All right, let me ask you this, because you said NASA was formed in 1958. Powers that be, let's say, they knew that the Earth was flat a couple years before that. How did they find this out? And then I'll have to come back to NASA, because we're talking about then a multi-trillion-dollar boondoggle that would be, in my opinion, best avoided. It seems to me that it would be easier to just pretend that, hey, we don't have the technology to do this, and just make up reasons why we can't travel into space. Sure. But why don't we? Yeah, let's go back.
We'll start with how they found out in the first place.
Yeah, pre-NASA.
Yeah, pre-NASA. From all indications, it looked like the old the old societies, the old secret societies, you can take your pick, Illuminati, Bilderberg, Masons, whoever, it doesn't really matter, probably had access to the old maps. But unfortunately, if you didn't have the technology to exploit it, it didn't do you any good. So let's say you were the king of France in 1500 and you had a flat Earth map in front of you. What are you going to do with it? You're not going to be able to do anything. It really wasn't until the internal combustion engine came out before they could really start to figure out what was going on. So when the engine came out, they had to develop certain technologies, and one guy came into play here, and that was Admiral Byrd. Richard E. Byrd, if you want to look him up, the youngest admiral in the United States Navy, greatest American explorer of all time. And in 1926, he goes up to the North Pole. And he's really known in the conspiracy world more for the Hollow Earth theory, because he claims that, or the secret diary claims that when he was up at the North Pole, there was some sort of opening, and that there was like sort of a journey to the center of the Earth thing happening there with another civilization that lives underneath us, the whole 9 yards. But that's where that whole thing ended. But what most people don't know is from 1928 until his death in 1957, he spent the rest of his career down at the South Pole, down in Antarctica, looking for something specifically. He just went mission after mission. He didn't do anything else from 1928 up until 1956. He was constantly doing the South Pole. He was looking for something. And I have no doubt what they were looking for, and that was, okay, we got to figure out if this map is right or wrong. And the most famous of his missions, and again, I don't want to get into it too much, was Operation High Jump in 1946. Was there a chance, because no one was really doing anything down in Antarctica during World War II, except for maybe the Nazis, but that's a whole other story for a whole other time, and perhaps a movie. At one point, it seemed like they gave up. Even the secret society seemed like they gave up, because in 1954, and again, this is on YouTube. You can go look this up it's a CBS. I don't know who released it from CBS, but it's brilliant. Admiral Byrd comes on television on CBS show called the Longines Chronoscope, and basically goes into that. The whole show is basically about his Antarctic thing. Basically says that Antarctica is made out of money. There's entire mountain ranges made out of coal. There's oil. There's minerals. There's uranium, and all the major players are down there getting ready for this. And you got to remember, England is still rebuilding from World War II, so they're down there looking for resources. Soviet Union's down there rebuilding for World War II. They're looking for the same stuff. Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, Chile, whole bunch of people's down there. Everyone's going to make money on this thing. And during that interview, he said, "Oh yeah, we got another mission coming up. It's called Operation Deep Freeze in 1955 to do, and to get an expedition where they're going to try to reach the boundaries of they're going to see as far as they can go with planes, because he flew his own planes." And then whatever happened during Operation Deep Freeze, that's when the world changed. That's when everything got really, really, really weird, because everybody who was down there to make money, every nation that was vested in this, and remember, everyone, there's no indigenous plant life or animal life or ancient civilizations or anything like that. Nothing to step on. It's just ice and snow and rock, and it's miserable. And all these nations could not get off the ice fast enough after Operation Deep Freeze. Literally, they all left it. It was all unilateral. All the nations. When does that happen? They all agreed to leave at the same time, and then Russia and America, the only two countries with any decent technology, they fire up their rocket programs immediately afterwards in 1957, start nuking the sky, and they nuked it for 4 years. As they're nuking the sky, two things happen. Again, if you believe in coincidences, and I don't, 1959, two things happen. One, the Van Allen radiation belt is announced by NASA, by a NASA employee, Van Allen, and then the exact same year, they seal off Antarctica quietly, permanently, with the Antarctic Treaty, which every nation, there were 10 nations that signed it in the beginning, and it's up to like 52 or 53 now, which basically means if your country becomes economically viable, you have to sign this treaty saying that no corporation in your country will do work on Antarctica ever. And that treaty isn't even up for review until right now. It's like 2041. And that treaty is still in effect today. Nobody goes there. It is protected by a group called the Antarctic Defense Force, a real group, not a secret group. You can look this up online. And it is sealed off for all time. And nobody talks about it. No one even discusses it. No company, doesn't matter how big you are, can even lobby for it. You can't even spin a story in any magazine or periodical. It says why it would be good for our company to be in Antarctica. You cannot run those stories. It is one of the greatest mysteries that has been hidden very, very well.
Well, it is interesting, and we talked about that before we went on together tonight. These companies that do have billion-dollar PR budgets, they could very easily launch a campaign saying exactly what you just said. We have every reason to be in Antarctica. This would be good for everybody. So I certainly go along with that. All of that said, how do you get from there to the Earth is flat? How do you get from there to this is evidence for this flat Earth model?
A combination. There was a combination of things. If I was, because I came from a design background as far as gaming simulation. So when I looked at this thing, there were certain aspects that screamed structure. One, of course, was you would have to seal off the outer edge and the upper edge, which was done exactly at the same time and very, very securely. So NASA controlled the skies, Antarctica controlled the outer edge, because in a flat map, Antarctica isn't this continent that looks kind of like Australia, where it's sitting in the middle of the ocean. It is literally stretched around the entire edge of a circular map. So those would be the two big ones. The other ones, though, is there's certain rules that cannot be broken on a flat map, and one of them is there are no shortcuts when it comes to a flat map, which means the plane routes in the southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, which would be the inner circle, would be fine, but the southern hemisphere, the plane routes would be wrong, which circles me back to how I kind of got started on this with the German guy that was talking about the plane routes. So when I was looking at the plane routes in the southern hemisphere, there were a lot of interesting things that kept leaping out at me. One was, if you were going to hide the routes in the southern hemisphere, the first thing you would do is you'd make sure that you would have as few or none, if possible, nonstops. So if you were flying anywhere from, say, South America to anywhere near Australia, it should just be a straight shot across the South Pacific Ocean. You know, no airspaces to deal with, 12 hours, piece of cake. The flight, you know, no problem. You can't find those flights most of the time. And so when I did Clue 7, which was called The Long Haul, which was given, that name was given to me by a British guy who was throwing me information. He and I were kind of collaborating on the data on this. The 95% of the flights in the Southern Hemisphere are connections, and they're weird connections. It's not like in the Northern Hemisphere where, you know, you have to go through Toledo to get to, you know, somewhere in Indiana. These connections go really, really into strange places, and I'll give you a perfect example. Like if you're flying from Rio to, say, Sydney, Australia, right, should be just a straight shot, Southern Hemisphere. Why in the world would you ever connect through Los Angeles or San Francisco or Dallas? Why would you go through the Northern Hemisphere at all, almost doubling your length? And people say, oh, well, you're picking up people. It's like, yeah, sort of. That might make sense, except when you take it on a globe, it's a weird arcing angle. But if you put that same plane route on a flat map, it almost turns into a perfect, either a really, really shallow dogleg or almost perfectly straight. The odds of that happening were really, really slim. So I was going, okay, that is one thing I would do. But the other thing, and this is the part that really jumped out at me, was people after Clue 7, they were saying, well, you know, we found a nonstop. Everyone kept sending me this Qantas Flight 64, and there was I think 5 nonstops in the entire Southern Hemisphere, which that alone should raise alarm bells. But people again want to hold on to the globe, so they were saying, no, this proves round Earth if there's these nonstops. So I started paying attention to the nonstops. There's the GPS system gets fed into various databases, but it's all based off the same system. GPS, of course, the Department of Defense, the United States built it, and which went online in about 1995. And I was watching these flights, and I was watching the Southern Hemisphere. And again, you can go into any of these flight trackers, and the Southern Hemisphere oceans will be empty. And I started watching some flights, and I'm waiting for these nonstops, and there's nothing. I'm seeing nothing. And so finally, I say, well, wait, where are the freaking planes? Any of them, even the connections. And as a plane starts leaving, let's say, from South America on its way to Australia or back and forth, it gets about 150 miles, 250 or 200 miles off the coast, and it just disappears off the GPS system entirely. I was going, oh, that's odd. And they all started doing that. And not only did they drop off visually, but if you look at the individual plane records, the plane records changed from latitude and longitude to approximate or estimated. Basically, the plane doesn't exist in the GPS system anymore. And then it flies its route, whatever route that is. And then an hour before touchdown, it blinks back on just off the coast of wherever it's going to land, and it comes back on, it lands. Everybody's happy. But the route cannot be proven. And that's when, you know, there's only so many coincidences I can see, and I was going, oh, that's very, very clever. It's like if you don't want to show people how the route is being taken in the Southern Hemisphere, you just disappear all the routes in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's brilliant. But no one would notice, because why would you? You know, the plane takes off, the plane lands. You know, the pilots don't care because they're running off of autopilot anyway. No one notices. All they know is, you know, people got from point A to point B, but the route is completely gone. And then people started emailing me and saying, well, you know, it could be something else. And I didn't really touch on this in the clues, which was it's possible that the GPS system just doesn't have coverage in these areas, which you would expect in a flat model. You would have these big gaps on the outer ring because if the entire GPS system is actually land-based and they say it's satellite-based, then there's certain places you won't be able to cover, and that would be the place you would cover. So, yeah, it was amazing to see. But once I started stacking up these things, there was only one thing I could look at, and that was the flat map. I couldn't look at a globe anymore.
Well, this is a very specific map then, and I want to get back to that in just a minute. You're listening to Mark Sargent on a show called Dark City. Back in a minute.
94.7 WABC.
You're listening to Dark City on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, you're listening to Dark City. My name is Steve Warner, here with Mark Sargent, who is saying that we live on a flat Earth, basically, and there is a very specific map that you say the UN actually uses. It's on their flag, but this is a map that discredited. I guess. So the question is why is the UN using it? And this is the correct map, you're saying, right?
Yeah. I stumbled across this when I was doing the clues, and I made a clue called the Map Makers. And again, it was just one of those great finds, kind of like the Admiral Byrd interview footage, which was when I was looking through the list of map projections on Wikipedia, I stumbled across a map that was identical to the flat Earth map. And if you want to know, again, I'll try to do it justice. If you want to know what a flat Earth map looks like over the radio, it's if you took a globe and you put your hand on top of the North Pole and you just squished it to where it was flat. So the North Pole became the center of the map. The continents were kind of spread out towards the edges, and then the very outside edge would be Antarctica. So I was going through the list of map projections, and I run into this map called the azimuthal AZIMUTHL equidistant map. And there was a lot of really interesting things about it. One, it was the only map in the list of projections that was actually endorsed by the USGS, which was the United States Geological Survey. And I thought, okay, that's really strange. Why would the United States government, the premier map makers of the world, why would they be using this map in their projection system? And then I looked at the origins. It's like, when was this map model created? It was created 1,000 years ago. And I go, that's even stranger, because 1,000 years ago we thought the Earth was flat. But it was 1,000 years ago. It was created by a guy, and I won't give his long name. He's a Persian scientist named Al-Biruni, Biruni. I was going, man, it's got to be a typo. There's no way why would the United States government be using a map where the design was done by a 1,000-year-old Persian scientist? And then I'm looking, and the Persian scientist, you keep following the links, and the Persian scientist, NASA knows full well who this guy is. They've got a moon crater named the Al-Biruni crater, supposedly on the moon, named after this guy. And I was going, okay. And then to throw one more wrinkle on this map, of all the map projections, this is the one that gets the most traffic. It's got all these little annotations next to it. And the other thing this map is known for is the exact map of the UN flag. So when you look at the UN flag, how the continents are kind of grouped at the center, that's what the flat Earth map is. But there's something really unusual about the UN flag, which again was finished in 1946. 10 years before Operation Deep Freeze, which meant, whatever secret society was involved here, they jumped the gun a little bit in 1946. They thought they knew, but they didn't know for sure. But the UN flag doesn't have Antarctica on it. It's what makes it different from the azimuthal map or the flat Earth map, and that is Antarctica is literally not anywhere on the map. And in place of it, there's these two giant reeds, kind of Greco-Roman spiky reeds that go around the outside of it. And that's really, really strange, because the UN doesn't mention what exactly they represent or why Antarctica isn't represented at all. They don't answer these questions.
Well, couldn't the argument be made that there is no one to represent in Antarctica? There's no government there. There's no people living there.
Maybe, or it could be the out of sight, out of mind thing, which is, look, we're going to do a flag, but we don't want to remind people that Antarctica is there. Also remember that the only photo up until Monday, 6 days ago, of the Earth from the entire Earth from space, with the 1972 photo from Apollo 17, didn't show America, which you would have thought they would have since it was an American program. It showed the bottom part of Africa, but the only continent it showed in its entirety was Antarctica. And again, not a coincidence. They wanted to show the shape of it there, but they didn't want to dwell on it. So leaving it off the UN flag, that was a no-brainer, because it's like, okay, we just won't, because most people never see the flat Earth map anyway. But to what you're asking, so the UN flag is the same as the azimuthal map, which is the exact same as the flat Earth map. The difference is the flat Earth map is considered crazy, because they look at it as a literal map, whereas the United States government looks at that map and says, no, it's just a projection. It's not. It's really a globe, but if you made it flat, that's what it would look like. And the two are not linkable, which is also weird. They're identical maps, but if you go to the Flat Earth part of Wiki, you see it's slightly different color, but that map is not referenced back to the AE map, and it's really, really odd.
Well,
There's just a lot of yes. Go ahead.
I got to be honest, because I'm looking at this AE map that you call it. I'm looking at that right now, and it sure looks to me like a sphere that you're looking at from the top down. The continents are distorted. It's not as if they're laid out flat. They certainly do look like they are curving downward, because you're looking at from that top down angle.
Yes. Yeah. That's true. And which is an excellent point, because people bring this up from time to time, and they say, well, the continents are distorted. I go, yeah, that's because there is no true flat Earth map out there. Because no one, up until now, you're not going to let that cat out of the bag. The closest thing we have to it is the AE map, although it is strange, again, that the UN would choose that as their flag. Of all the projections they would use, that's the one they would use. Why not use a globe? Why not, there's all sorts of different little fun things you could do with that. But they chose in 1946, which is, again, was an odd year, to use the AE map as their projection.
Well, it gets in all the continents. I mean, if you're making a cute little logo, this makes it neat and clean. I will say that.
If you're going for circular, but why not just use the Mercator map at that point? Because then you can squeeze everything in. I mean, if you go to the list of map projections, there's a whole slew of them you can choose. Again, it's one of those I think it was one of those in-your-face type moments where they jumped the gun, where they came on and said, oh yeah, 1946, it's our little inside joke. We know what the world really looks like. But 10 years later, they almost, couldn't confirm it themselves.
All right. So if we go back to Richard Byrd and what he found down in Antarctica, how do you know that something on Antarctica led him to believe that was basically the end of the line?
From what I could tell, he was the greatest explorer of all time, and I don't think they had to coax him very, very hard. But when he came on during that show, which was interesting, in 1954, he had said very specifically that, because they asked him, they go, is there still parts of this world that haven't been found yet? And he goes, yeah. He goes, there's a part of this world that's beyond the South Pole that's bigger than the entire United States that I haven't even seen yet. And he was like the guy. If anyone gets to see things first, it's him. So...
Well, it's just a little bit inhospitable. It would take quite an undertaking to put anything out there. Look, if we're talking about taking a road trip from New York City to the middle of the country, it's nice to have diners along the way. It's nice to have roadside motels to stay in. You don't have anything in Antarctica. You've got to take everything with you, and then what are you going to find when you get there? I mean, yes, there are resources, but my understanding is they just haven't been found in significant enough quantities to warrant some massive operation there. Now you may believe differently, but these are, I think, salient points. Sure,
no question. Antarctica is one of those unusual continents, though. And again, from a design standpoint, it is brilliant. If it is circular, then what the negative reinforcements, again, whoever built this place, are so fantastic leading up to it. For example, salt water freezes at 15 degrees. You have icebergs leading up to Antarctica. Antarctica's coastline is pretty much a 200-foot wall of ice. all over the place. You need planes to get into that, or some extreme hiking gear. Once you get over that 200-foot wall of ice, it slopes up really, really fast to about 2 miles, about 10,000 feet, and it plateaus. It's really unique compared to all the other continents. Stays at 10,000 feet or higher with, again, no plant life, no animal life, nothing else. You're absolutely right. You have to bring your own stuff with you. But from a design standpoint, it also creates so much negative reinforcement that naturally any expedition up until that point would want to turn back. You'd never want to go out there.
Yeah, because there's certainly no guarantees of anything.
No, there isn't. But he kept trying from 1928 all the way up until 1956. Kept hammering at it. Why spend all that time? Why spend your entire life? And remember, he was a career Navy guy. Why lead so many men to keep going at it? And then once you finally, get to whatever point this is, then you just turn around and say, that's it, everybody leaves at the same time. Yeah, if it was one nation, maybe. England jumps on the U.S. bandwagon, maybe. But the Russians, they were ravaged after World War II. They needed the resources. And they didn't even hesitate. They were like, nope, we're out of here. Everybody was out of there. And then why put the treaty in place? No one talks about that. Why put it in at all? Say, well, it's environmental. No, not in 1959 it wasn't. Greenpeace wasn't even formed until 1971. 1959, there was no such thing. Environmentalism wasn't even a word. And they locked it down. And in fact, Byrd even said on his part of his interview, he was worried that there'd be skirmishes breaking out over boundaries, over who's going to lay claim to what. And then they all give up that claim at the same time? Nah. Not buying it. Not buying it for a second.
And you say that basically the environmentalist movement didn't come onto the scene until quite a while later. So there was not that concern at the time. You say
no. Now they're using it. Now they're using it as a crutch. They're saying, environmental issues. The emperor penguins on the coastline and maybe some sea lions, but that doesn't hold water. Even now it wouldn't hold water because there's nothing on the interior. There's the penguins are out on the fringe. On the interior where there's literally no plant or animal life to speak of. There's no ecosystem. There's no reason. You know this. It is the greatest. Antarctica is the greatest continent that nobody thinks about because it's completely shrouded in all these little things. You can spend $10,000-$12,000, go on a tour of the peninsula, south of Chile, and take some pictures of penguins. You do the interior, you're not going to get very far. In fact, they just did a thing the end of I think last year, where the tourism group just started putting things in place to ban drones, civilian drones. Because they're ahead of us. They anticipate this stuff. Why would you ban civilian drones? Yeah.
Well, look, something I have to take issue with you on is that Russia needed resources post World War II. No argument there. But to get from Russia down to Antarctica, that's a hell of a trip. That is quite a financial undertaking and a logistical one for as I say, no guarantees. You just might not have the resources that are there in enough abundance to be able to make the trip worthwhile.
Are you going to abandon all future claims as well? That's they think long term in this case. You can't tell me that it wasn't like there was even much of a debate. It's not like they sat down and they had some holdouts, like Russia was going to hold out or England was going to hold out. It was all unilateral.
Well, then I have to ask, who in this group knew that this was basically the end of the earth? That Antarctica was the end of the line.
First bets, at the very least, the Russians and the Americans. At whatever teams were down there. You didn't necessarily have to tell the other guys. Whoever found it first. So let's say Admiral Byrd was doing a joint mission because you have to get somebody else on board. Let's say Admiral Byrd found it, right? Let's say he flew his plane next to it, landed, stared up at it, said, "Oh yeah, we got problems." But the thing is, you've got to tell some of the other nations, otherwise they're not going to go along with it. So you've got to get at least Russia on board, maybe England. The rest will kind of fall in line, because they'll follow the bigger players. Now, you don't necessarily have to tell them everybody why. You still can keep it compartmentalized. But at that point, Russia and America, they become pals. And again, they start up their rocket programs immediately after Operation Deep Freeze. The mysterious circumstances of why you would fire nukes straight up for 4 years, from both sides. And then they both quit on the exact same day. They both stop, firing the last shots up on the same day in 1962. Not a coincidence. People say, oh, it was a moratorium. No.
You don't think that anybody would have said, Bird, you're bonkers, we're going to keep checking this place out? If
you mean if Bird found it and then well, no, because they
and then was telling people about it, people who also signed on to the treaty, no?
Well, yeah, and Bird was a special case because, he died in 1957. Yeah, he was in his 60s and they said it was natural causes, but he was their guy. If anyone, he was literally the guy to go to. He was the Indiana Jones of his day. So if he was the one, if he walked up to it, again, think of it like this. I'll paint a picture for you. He finds a wall. We'll just say it's a wall, like a Game of Thrones ice wall, type of thing. If you watch that show, but you can't. But it's so high, you can't tell where it's going. But you can tell that it seems to be breaching the clouds, and it goes to the left and to the right of you a very, very great distance. Well, I mean, yeah, he can report that and say, okay, it's a wall. He goes, but I think this wall actually may start curving upwards. It may be something better than that. Coincidence, America and Russia, what's the first thing they do? They have to start ramping up their rocket program in 1957, start firing rockets up. And what's the first thing they would try to do? I mean, why would you use megaton weapons? We're talking, 3.8, 3.9 megaton weapons against the sky? Why would you use something that big? Why not go into the low kilotons? Or even the medium kilotons? It was no doubt in my mind. It was the typical male response, and that is, if we are in an enclosed system, the first thing we should try to do is see if we can blow a hole through this thing, regardless of the consequences. And people say, well, that's somewhat radical. Think of the Oppenheimer thing, where there was that thought, that the one scientist said that there was a chance we could burn up the atmosphere and everyone would die. And they said, well, who's going to yell at us if that happens? So, they were just following the same protocols they always do.
All right, Mark Sargent, his website is enclosedworld.com. Not only are we on a flat Earth, we are in basically a biodome. That's what Mark is saying tonight. You're listening to Dark City on the Dark Matter Digital Network. Back in a minute.
'77 WABC.
You're listening to Dark City on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, Mark. Good Lord, there is so much to get to here,
Sure.
and so many things that I obviously have to take issue with. The NASA program, which you have said has been a fraud since day one, so I wanted to go back to that.
Okay.
A multi-trillion-dollar operation that's been going on for 50-plus years. If the powers that be knew in the mid-'50s that this was an impenetrable dome and we would not be able to exceed the limits of said dome, why not just pretend that make up some we don't have the technology? Why all the theater? Why spend all the money? Why involve all the people?
Well, and again, remember, most people got to remember, NASA is not Star Trek. They are not Starfleet. They are not this benign scientific organization. They are a military arm of the United States government. So as far as not telling anybody or trying to give them an easier way out, it started as a fairly small lie by comparison. You could say that, well, and again, I think that's what they had options. When they were saying the Van Allen radiation belts in 1959 were very deadly, they could have gone down that road and said it was impenetrable. But somewhere along the line, they figured, well, you know what? Maybe it'd just be easier if we just faked the program. And logistically, you could do a lot more things, and you could funnel more money into other programs. It's not like the money was wasted. I mean, yeah, in adjusted dollars, it's trillions, of course. But it took decades to do. I'll give you a perfect example. The famous case, anyone wants to look it up, look at the documentary called Room 237, or Kubrick's Odyssey. And the story goes, and I absolutely believe it, is that at some point they looked at different directors. It's like, okay, who can fake the space program? Who can fake it well enough? And they came up with Stanley Kubrick in the early 60s, offered him an unlimited budget and at least a 5-year time frame. And he negotiated it into, because again, it took 5 years to make 2001: A Space Odyssey. And at the end, they also said, oh, yeah, by the way, if you want, you could use whatever research you're doing and turn it into a movie. 1968, a year before the Apollo mission comes out, he makes 2001: A Space Odyssey, which has aged very, very well, even from a Blu-ray standpoint. It's beautiful to watch. It's striking. And at that point, it was already in people's heads. And it didn't cost that much money. So to fake something like this, yeah, I mean, in trillion adjusted dollars, but it's just money. And again, you can funnel it into other things. So yeah, you give some money to the rocket program, which gets developed into weapons. Spacesuits, maybe you'll do something with that. You can funnel it into other research. And you can keep the lie going. Again, it's tricky. You were never going to be able to hold this thing forever. It's tricky, though, because compartmentalization, like for people that haven't looked it up, did the Apollo astronauts know? Yeah, of course they knew. They knew they were faking it, and at one point they were probably told why they were faking it. And this really, really weighed on them to the point, if you look at Clue 11, where they most of these guys lived fairly reclusive lives or hid inside a bottle, and they were in a rough case. But the authority learns from these things. So psychologically, they said, okay, we're not telling any more astronauts what exactly is going on. We're just going to let them fake whatever, and they can just pretend they're actors and have fun with it. And that's really all they had to do at this point. So at the highest levels, the guy, in fact, my neighbor who moved out recently, his name was Wayne Ottinger. He was the garage mechanic for NASA through the Gemini program, the Mercury program, the Apollo program. All the astronauts by first name basis, of course, because he worked on all their stuff. His walls were just covered in plaques. He knew nothing because why would he? He's the mechanic. He builds the vehicles. Doesn't mean they have to go anywhere.
Did you talk to him about any of this?
Oh, good Lord, no. I couldn't because he lives here in Boulder. He's in his 80s, and honestly, he was so proud of the work that he had done at NASA, and why shouldn't he be? He was a lifelong JPLer. Worked on all the stuff. He wrote a book. He was still does lectures and talks to kids and has a great time. But no, I wasn't gonna. Why hurt a man like that? It would just be anticlimactic in my opinion. It's like let him just keep doing what he's doing. But the point is that he and several levels above him, they do not have to know. Only at the telemetry levels do you really have to have people involved, the software guys that handled the trajectory. When the shuttles or whatever rocket, they loop over and they take these really, really shallow arcs. They don't go, even close to being straight up. Those guys have to know. But most of NASA, most of the subcontractors, and when I say most, I mean 99% of them, they don't have to know anything. No different than any secret military operation.
And you don't think, you're talking about engineers, you're talking about software people, telemetry, you don't think that any of these people would say anything? An Edward Snowden type character might emerge?
I'm hoping for something like that, but I got to remember the atomic weapon program was kept a secret. I'll give you another one.
Well, not forever,
No, it wasn't. And this thing cannot be kept forever as well. and they know this. This is like hiding something from your roommate. It's like hiding a pack of cigarettes in your own apartment. What I'm saying is you can't hide the entire world forever. You can do a really, really good job at it for some time, and they spent a ton of money, and they did it for about 60 years roughly, and they've had a heck of a run. But unfortunately, the technology, the detection technology, especially of the internet hive mind, and that's people that are listening now, that has gotten so refined that it has changed the way we look at things, especially when it comes to conspiracies. The Apollo program has been dissected to such a degree now that it's almost cartoonish. Nobody even, there's so many people that interesting that I deal with in this topic that will say, no, I don't believe in the moon landings, but don't take away the ISS from me. Don't take away the globe. I'm going, look, if NASA lied about one thing, how can you trust anything? You can't just piecemeal it. If they're going to lie about one operation, then they're going to go for broke and lie about everything they can get away with, and that's where it starts. NASA will be the. Go ahead.
No, sorry.
NASA will be the fall guy on this, and I think they know they've been waiting for this in advance. This is not like we're the conspiracy crowd or this movement is ahead of this. No, they know that this is happening. I mean, the shuttle program gone. They're subcontracting out, the ISS stuff to supposedly Virgin Galactic and SpaceX. No, they know this is coming. It's just a question of what they've got up their sleeve now, because this topic, which we're talking about, wasn't even a discussable topic last year. Why not? Why is everybody latching onto this now? Why is this getting allowed to be, get traction the way it has? The search engines. No, nothing's diminishing this, and we're still trying to figure out the ulterior motive.
Well, the reason I brought up that specific point about NASA is this: spending all the money, involving all the people. You are introducing so many more factors. You're making the whole operation so much more elaborate than maybe it needs to be. Meaning, you have that many more chances to get caught along the line, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, they've minimized it to a certain degree, but there's certain things that, again, it was so blatant. You wonder if this was the plan all along, that this thing was going to fold. The first thing would be, of course, that the fact that there was no pictures of the Earth from space, except for the one that they released in 1972 from Apollo 17, and that there's literally no video that they claim of the Earth rotating on its axis. The one that they sort of tried to pass off, the only one, was the 1991 from Galileo. And then, coincidentally, if you believe in weird timing, the fact that NASA came out just this last Monday, and said that, oh, yeah, by the way, here's our second photo of the Earth from space, the first one in 43 years, which confirmed everything that the whole Flat Earth movement has been talking about. It's like, okay, why would you admit that? Why? But yes, there's some elaborate stuff that they could have probably done simpler, but on the other hand, they were dealing with you could only fake it with the technology that was available to you at the time. So they've been it's this weird race where they have to scale up their fakery in relation to the detection ability of the public. And now it's gotten to where it's so close that, when they talk about going to Mars, I have absolutely no doubt they can't go to Mars because they wouldn't dare. If somebody handed me a black folder, if I worked for the NSA, somebody handed me the black folder that said Mars mission, and how to fake it, I would just be scared out of my mind. I was going, I can't fake this. I don't care how much money you give me. There's no way we're going to be flawless. If anyone has any doubt, go to moviemistakes.com. It doesn't matter how much money you spend on a movie. Mistakes are made. And the hive mind, the internet misses nothing. If a guy in Kansas at 3 a.m. notices a coffee cup moving from one side of the room to the other in a single frame, he's going to post it. And then cat's out of the bag. And that's what's been happening this entire year. It's just being torn apart brick by brick.
You don't think it could be faked? I think it could very easily be faked.
I disagree. There's too many, from a production standpoint, there's too many checks that you would have to make checks beyond redundancy. I mean, I know people go out and give you a perfect example. Yeah, the movie Gravity is very, very good production, and you could intersplice some of those scenes and into a documentary and pass it off as the real thing, no question. But you can't do everything. There are certain aspects, and what I try to point people at is, again, if you think it's real, you got to watch the ISS footage. If you think it's real, watch the documentary 237 or the British production, Funny Thing Happened from the Earth to the Moon. It's been so torn apart that at this point, unfortunately, it is one of the cruxes of this whole movement. That is, NASA. There's got to be a fall guy in this, and NASA is the gatekeeper, and they have been since day one.
But this goes beyond NASA. I mean, you talk about the U.S. Geological Survey, you talk about the UN. Again, we're just involving more and more people. Something that I had asked you before we went on was about UFOs. You believe in UFOs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I absolutely believe in UFOs. I have watched UFOs from Colorado with night vision binoculars for years. In fact, I've got footage on my machine taken by a guy right down here in Colorado Springs. Do UFOs change in this model? They do, but they're still around. Meaning, if you're in a giant Truman Show enclosed dome or Simpsons dome or under the dome television, whatever version of dome you want to choose, UFOs still exist. Spaceships still exist. Now, who are they and exactly how they are tied to the system? Tough call, because can they get out of here, or are they stuck in here with us? If they're stuck in here with us, they're probably part of an underground system. If they can get out, they don't necessarily have to go to other planets, because, and I try to tell people, it's like, look, people ask me all the time, they say, is there space outside of this structure, like outer space? And I go, well, yeah, there can be, but why would you have it? Meaning, if you're faking outer space, then you don't necessarily have to do the real thing. Meaning, if you build small, you fake big. But when it comes to UFOs, are they the janitors? Are they the maintenance team? Are they the superintendents? All are possible, but they're still following the same protocols that they have for thousands of years, which is, I don't want to use a cliche thing like the Prime Directive, but that's what they kind of do. And that is, they are not allowed to land on Main Street, come out, wave, say hi, take a picture, shake hands, sign an autograph, and leave for various reasons. One would be the religious implications. But to date, no ship has ever done that. The closest thing we've got is the 1561 Nuremberg event, which was outstanding. I wish more people would talk about it. But yeah, UFOs, that was my long-winded version of UFOs are absolutely real. I absolutely believe in them, and I absolutely believe they can coexist in this system.
The reason I ask is this. You have hundreds, if not thousands, of very credible people, government officials, pilots, anybody out there who has a credible background, basically, and people who are not so credible, too, who may actually have seen and continue to see things in the skies that they can't explain, and may be extraterrestrial visitors or visitors from somewhere that we don't really, have a good grasp on where that may be. There are these people who make deathbed confessions. There are people who don't talk about these things for 50 years, and then they, one day Grandpa tells a story, and it comes out. And this isn't a one or a two time thing. There have been a lot of stories like that, deathbed confessions, and people who didn't want to talk about something for a really long time, but they say, I was involved in this or that, and you don't have anybody like that. And you're saying it's not one or two people. It's USGS, it's NASA, some people at NASA, some people at the UN. But it seems that you would expect if what you're saying is all true, and people know it to be true, don't you think one person would come out and say, you know what, this is the mother of all conspiracies. I was involved in covering it up. Here it is. And to my knowledge, that's never happened. I mean, have you heard anything about that? No, it hasn't happened. And there's several reasons for that. One, it is not even different from UFOs. UFOs is a really widespread thing. But this topic literally wasn't even a relevant topic until 6 months ago. Nobody talked about this. That's how well this conditioning was. So that's why I called for the whistleblowers, I think in Clue 10, maybe Clue 10, maybe Clue 9. No, Clue 10.
where I said, look, there's somebody that knows. You're absolutely right. There's somebody that's tied to Antarctica. There's somebody tied to NASA at the highest levels. There's somebody tied to, people that make maps. And somebody in one of these fields, I have no doubt, is eventually going to come forward. No different than Matt Boylan did, several years ago. Only when he came out, he came across as absolutely nuts, because the first whistleblowers always will. When he came out and said, the sky is falling, nobody was even paying attention to him. And he was, granted, he was an entertainer, and so he tried to spin it the best way he could, to a certain audience. But he was only the first. There will be others. Now that it has become irrelevant, we've gone beyond the ridiculous part of this topic now, again, for whatever reason, and now it's into the heated debate stage, where there are people all over YouTube, all getting into knockdown, drag-out fights over, is it real or is it not real? And sooner or later, yeah, you're absolutely right. Somebody is going to come forward. Because they have to. That's the natural progression of things. It's the field is pretty thin as far as who you could probably choose from, because this secret would be so compartmentalized that there would be so very few people that would actually know, that part of it. But that's what I'm hoping for.
All right, we're talking to Mark Sargent. His website is, all of a sudden it has escaped me. Oh, Enclosed
World.
Enclosedworld.com. You can check out the YouTube videos and read over what Mark has been doing. My name is Steve Warner. We're talking about exactly that, an enclosed world, a flat world tonight on Dark City.
'77 WABC.
Dark City returns. Mark Sargent continues with us. Well, there's a few other things to get to here. This is an expansive subject. You mentioned in one of your videos, you brought up the movie, The Village, M. Night Shyamalan movie. And for people who haven't seen it, it's not a good movie, so I don't care that I'm ruining it right now. These people are in a village that they believe to be, and you as the audience too, believe it to be a village in the 1800s. And then at the end of the movie, you find out, oh no, it's just these people believing it's 1800s and it's actually modern day. Okay.
Yeah.
So you make the point that it only really takes a number of years, maybe a generation or two, and everybody believes their little system is, they just accept that reality. What I'm asking basically is the celestial bodies that are up there in the sky. Why don't we start here?
Sure.
Are they really there?
Good question. All right, let's put it this way. Let's take the village and let's build it a little differently. So the village, which was, again, it really wasn't that good a movie. It's all about the plot twist at the end. But the thought is, if you had, and you have to be born into it. That's the whole catch. No different than the Truman Show. Truman was born into that dome, which is why it worked. Because when you're growing up, you believe what your parents tell you and your teachers tell you and the government and whoever else. The village, no different, just more people. And that happened without a dome. But let's go back to the Truman Show. If he's born into it, are the stars and the moon and the sun real above him? No, of course they're not. They proved that with one of the spotlights that fell. It had a little joke where it had Sirius on it. And in a system like this, and this is the question I pose to people. I go, look, the Truman Show is 20 miles wide, if that. And you only had to fool one person for sake of the movie. But actually, in reality, you probably could have fooled an entire class of kids. The question is, how If you expanded it out to 100 miles, how many people could you put into it? 1,000 miles, several thousand miles. Because once you get to several thousand miles, that's where we are now. Once you get out that far, you still don't have to make the sky real at all. It really just becomes a giant planetarium, if anyone's ever been in the inside of those. If you were born into a planetarium and you look up at the sky and somebody tells you the stars are real, who are you to say that they're not? No different with Truman. If a system is built, if a dome is built thousands of miles wide, then no, the stars and the planets would not have to be real at all. They would have to, just be elaborate projections, beautiful works of art, and timepieces, if you believe in astrology. The sun and the moon, though, they probably should have a little more detail to them, which means the sun would be, no different than a giant light bulb, and the moon would be a giant night. And I would want to make them three-dimensional objects because they are viewed, they're viewed so often. The moon is the most photographed object, I think, of all time. And the sun, it's where we get all our light. So you would have to put a lot more love and care into those things. But as far as the rest of it goes, the stars and the planets, no different than a planetarium, just on a much, much bigger scale. And people think that's outlandish. It's like, look, think if we spent a lot of money. Yeah, planetariums aren't very big, but if we wanted to build a 20-mile wide planetarium, absolutely we could do it. How big could we make it? Who knows? How big could another civilization make it? Oh, I think they could make it pretty big.
Okay, so two questions then.
Yeah.
I go back to what I was asking about the village and how it only takes years, maybe a generation or two, for people to accept whatever the reality is.
Yeah.
Why put anything in the sky at all if it's only going to take a certain amount of time before people just, okay, I'm looking at the sky, it's green during the day and it's just black at night. They can make it whatever colors they want. Why bother putting anything up there?
More detail equals more distraction, more than anything. Some of the old legends, you want to go back, and I won't be able to quote them right off the bat, but there are stories and legends of the time when the moon wasn't here. The moon wasn't in the sky, or that the sun wasn't here, that, like you were just saying, where it was just light and it was just dark. Kind of boring from a design standpoint. The more stuff you have up there, the more you can distract people, and it also influences culture. Think of how much astrology has influenced us, the zodiac signs that we have everywhere, the myths, the legends. Oh, geez, so many things have been influenced by the sky. If you go back 1,000 years ago, that's really where we got most of our influence, from what I can tell.
All right, so these celestial bodies are projections. Are they projected from inside or outside?
Tough call. If I had to take a guess, maybe outside, just because it'd be easier to deal with. Because at that point, you wouldn't have to worry about any atmospheric disturbances. You could deal with the weather a lot easier if it was dealt with from the outside. Hard to say. When I described it in the clues, I just kind of describe it as layers of two-dimensional and three-dimensional projections. Using some sort of holographic technology. Wouldn't be that tough to do.
And the biggie is who is doing the projecting?
The builder / creator / whoever you want to, whoever they are, they're running the show. And what I try to tell people is I go, regardless if you think they're an advanced civilization or a divine power, they do have answers to more questions, to most of our questions, which is why I was trying to tell people, look, the government may be hiding, part of the reasons of our existence. They could be hiding the handprint of God, because even if you parked an alien spaceship next to the dome or next to the wall and said, oh, yeah, by the way, these guys built it, most of your major religions in this world, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, they're all going to say it's divine, no question, because it's bigger than us and it's where we live. And it's all we know.
So how do you know it's not?
How do I know it's not divine?
Right.
Oh, no. I firmly believe it's divine. No question. Do I think God subcontracted out some of the work? Yeah, maybe. I mean, God needs his tools as well, but I don't want to necessarily get into the definition of God versus demigod or whatever. But do I think it's divine? Yeah, you bet I do. It's the only thing I think that it changes us as a civilization. I think this thing gives us hope if it's revealed, because it lets us know we're not alone in the universe. I mean, really not alone. Not only not alone, but we're taken care of. We're in a wonderful terrarium. Could we be kittens in a box? Yeah, maybe. But what I try to tell people lately is like, or we could be baby scorpions in a box, because we tend to be a little dangerous when we're running around loose. But I think knowing that this thing exists helps us, gives people hope, gives people a completely different perspective. And if somebody's looking over your shoulder, whether it's real or not, would you still make the decisions that you're making now? Which is why I did the stoplight argument. You don't run the stoplight if there's a camera there. Why not? Well, because you might get caught. Well, then why are you thinking about running it? And apply that to the entire world, and that's where I think we are. That we finally get to see that one of our parents is sitting on the couch reading a newspaper, and every once in a while glancing over the top and taking a look and saying, "All right, they seem to be doing okay."
Well, when we talk about this dome that's up there, is this artificial construction, as you say, subcontracted out, or do you believe that? Tell me a little bit about the
layout.
Yeah, basically.
If you had to make a dome like this, you wouldn't. I mean, there's some people that said, well, the big argument is right now is, well, how high does it have to be? Does it like a snow globe, where it's a really high arc? Or is it more like a sports stadium where it's a really, really shallow dome? And what's it constructed out of? Oof, boy, take your pick. Heavy element, heavy water, force field, a vibrational frequency. It could be any one of a number of things. But whatever it is, it seems to be somewhat impenetrable, at least by conventional technology. Now, whether or not HARP can get through it, I don't think so. CERN. Could they get through it? Yeah, maybe. Maybe they're trying to get through it by phasing through some sort of dimensional thing. It is, though, designed very, very well. There appears to be a weather system built into it that controls the jet stream. And again, if you have something this big, creating weather with a circular jet stream, and again, if people want to have some fun, look at the real-time weather centers and then flip it into the top-down mode, and it looks very, very efficient. Because then you're looking at it from a top-down flat Earth model. But as far as what else it could be constructed of, it's really up for speculation at that point. All I can say is that it appears very, very real, and far enough away from us that we can't. 99.99% of the population would never know it was there, which is part of the reason you would hide it, is so that people don't think about it. What I tried to, I think I told you before we started this thing, was the big key with building a dome like this is you have to make it hidden. Hidden. That's the key word here, because people do not like to be confined. Even if the fence is painted pink with happy kittens on it, people will still see it as a fence, as confinement. But if you make the fence invisible and then reinforce that by saying, oh yeah, by the way, you're on a globe, so there is no fence, then everybody acts naturally. And that's part of the brilliance of everything that's been designed here.
Why do you think then we were allowed to advance as far as we have advanced? I mean, why allow us to even invent the airplane? Why allow us to invent nukes?
Well, if you're going to let a civilization develop naturally, then you gotta go all out. I mean, yeah,
you could throw a wrench into the works here and there.
You could, and maybe they have in certain cases. Like, why don't we have Jetson-style flying cars by now? Why don't we have a unified field engine, which would give us basically the ability to create our own, little UFOs and fly everywhere? That would end this little story real quick. I think we have been somewhat nudged here and there, But it's still interesting. You know, every civilization, which I try to really talk about in Clue 8, which is creative force, every civilization has its own unique qualities, mostly in the creative process. But you got to take the good with the bad when it comes to creative process. Yes, we create beautiful symphonies and paintings and dance and literature. But yeah, we also create some horrible, horrible weapons. We're an interesting breed, and I think they probably tried to slow us down in some cases. But at the same time, we're still here. We haven't blown ourselves up, so we seem to be a limited success.
Do you think there could be a time in the future when they just shake the snow globe?
Maybe. The stories about, and people had actually warned me about that when I first started down this road, which was could we be prompting whoever built this place to hit the reset button? And I said, well, yeah, maybe, but at the same time, the Tower of Babel wasn't destroyed entirely. It's not like a big lightning bolt came down and killed everybody. The creator, if you believe the story, the creator just got involved and said, you know what? This civilization is way too unified and is moving way, way too quickly. Let's disperse their languages, move them out to different parts of the world, and we'll just let everything go from there. Yeah. On the other hand, if you go into the story of the Great Flood, which makes a lot more sense in an enclosed system, maybe that civilization didn't do so well. Maybe they were a lost cause. Do I think we're a lost cause? No, because I see the potential for this to unite us to a certain degree. It probably won't be up to us in the end, but what do we got to lose at this point? Which is why I'm pushing for it.
Yeah, I have to ask, on your website, I couldn't find you selling anything. Are you selling anything?
No, I'm not selling anything. There's no fund me pages, there's no books, there's no t-shirts, there's no coffee mugs.
And you don't sound like a raving lunatic either. That's what's interesting. So I've been trying to figure out exactly
what's my angle?
Yeah.
I do not have an angle on this. This just came to me one night, where I said, again, that Jerry Maguire moment where I woke up and I said, I do not know where the message came from, to be perfectly honest. The narrative that came into my head, yeah, it was in my voice and I could hear it and I could type out everything for every clue without skipping a beat. I never threw away a single one, but there's something else behind. I'm not going to go as far as saying I'm a messenger, that sort of thing, or I'm just a vessel. But there's something more to this. It's almost like it wants to be revealed. I do not know why. And for me, I'm just trying to get the message out there because I firmly believe we would be better for it. So if it turns into a paying gig down the road, yeah, maybe. But we're 6 months in. And I haven't made a dime. I even went out of my way because people said, "Oh, can I send you money?" I said, "No. If you're going to send me anything, send me cookies." And kind of tongue in cheek, but yeah, I've gotten cookies in the mail, and and they were all delicious.
You trusted them?
Yeah. Well, yeah. People said that. They go. My mother calls me up and she goes, "Don't eat any cookies." And I go, come on. And I've gotten cookies from all over the world so far, which has been fantastic.
Oh, that's
but
funny.
Yeah, I mean, again, I trust people for the most part. I believe in the goodness in humanity. I know that sounds cheesy, but I do. And I really hope for the best in this case. And I, so far, it's been really, really great. As much as there's been people that have been bracing against this, there's been a lot of people that have been super, super positive. Lots of phone calls, lots of messages, lots of emails saying, I love what you're doing. Keep going. And, if I end up being, part of one of the spokespeople for this thing, I'll be as humble as possible.
Well, I know that, as I said when we started this interview, some of the flat Earth people definitely take issue with some of the things that you say. Specifically, I think the dome is what they don't like.
The reason is because in the true flat Earth model, one, it's tabletop flat, and I kind of treat it with little warps, here and there, kind of like an old hubcap. But the other thing is that some of them, one in particular, and that's Matt, if he's listening, because he's an artist, he doesn't believe in any restrictions, and he thinks that there are more worlds like ours kind of laid out like an egg crate, but there's no barrier. And And again, if that proves out to be the case and there's no dome, hey, great. What they were firing the nukes at, and what the space program is about, yeah, we'll see about that. But the big thing why I believe in a dome is I think that right now we are a little too dangerous to just be let running around the playground. And if every instinct in my body says that, yeah, you'd want to seal us in, at least for a while. Now, if that dome was lifted, that's a whole other thing.
Well, then that raises the question: was the dome ever not there, in your opinion?
Could have been in the very beginning. Although, if you believe in the Tower of Babel story, which seems like, again, it's hard to say, but if you believe that the Tower of Babel story was one of the early civilizations, was it 1.0? Yeah, maybe not. Maybe it was like 2.0. Then they were absolutely trying to build that thing towards something. But I'll throw another wrinkle at you, and that is, some people have said, well, who were the first ones in here? Who were the first tenants? And they said, were they the fallen ones? If we go down the religious side, and they say, were they the fallen? The fallen angels. And I said, well, if they were, then there absolutely is a dome, because that's the whole point, is to make sure they don't go anywhere. So, yeah, I'm not backing away from the dome anytime soon. Let's put it that way.
All right, more with Mark Sargent in a minute. We're talking about flat Earth and a dome over it. We're talking about being in a big terrarium, basically. My name is Steve Warner. You're listening to a show called Dark City.
Listening to Dark City on the Dark Matter Radio Network. On demand, darkcity.fm.
All right, we are back with Mark Sargent. You mentioned that your mom said don't eat any of the cookies. I think Mom might have been right about that, but you're still around. So
I am still around. I got a great box of cookies recently from Sweden. I couldn't read any of the labels, only that they use a lot of grape-flavored pudding at the centers of their cookies called Kram, Kram, and those were very, very good. I've gotten French cookies and American cookies, and it's been really, really good. But again, I'm trying to stay as positive as I can through this. That's my big message here, and that is, I am not treating it as a doom gloom like some people said. Prison planets. They're going down that road. And I say no. Let's look at this thing, from a glass half full.
Yeah, well, couldn't you also look at it from that other angle? That certainly could be the case. I mean, you could just be putting your positive spin on it.
You could. I mean, some people have gone down. There's so many Matrix comparisons to this, and I go, look, if it's sinister, if it's supposed to be a really, really horrible place, then it's an awfully beautiful place, and which is why I try to include in my audio stuff, as far as interviews go, I include some really, really pretty pictures from around the world, and it's very, very beautiful, but and every other life form on this planet seems to get along. Again, I'm not going to steal from the Matrix too much. Seems to get along really, really well with this ecosystem, except for us. We're the only ones that seem to be doing damage here. So, if you want to get into the origins of why, the old argument, it's like, why does God let bad things happen to good people? Maybe we volunteered for it. Could we be in this system voluntarily? That's also another very real possibility. Use the Bill Hicks reference, which is it could be an amusement park ride to a lesser extent. A very elaborate one. But the thing about amusement park rides is, you get on the roller coaster, and some people do not have fun on roller coasters. But the point was, you bought the ticket, you got in the car, and you went. You had every chance to back out, but you still got on that roller coaster. So when it comes to this world, yeah, could be involuntary system.
Well, when I ask about, or when I bring up your mom telling you about the cookies, so she knows about all of this, and I want to know what she thinks about this whole idea.
You know,
friends, family, anybody.
My friends are kind of half and half on it, but when it comes to moms, one, she's a strong Christian, so she was bracing against it because the church has adopted a globe thing for centuries. But once some of the other people, because there's been not just me, there's been a whole bunch of people doing stuff, but several people that have gone down the religious path have been referencing it to different religious works. And as far as Christianity goes, there are a lot of references that seem to indicate that this thing could be more flat than a globe. And so over time, she has kind of gone on board with it. She's not a huge champion, but she listens to all the interviews and she believes what I'm doing. Because again, once you get your head around it for a little while, it's tough to go back, because it gets stuck in your head, because if you're trying to debunk it, you're looking for that magic bullet. You think, okay, I've got something here I can just slap on the table and just end this right now. But every time you try, it tends to backfire, which is, again, it's odd. And I've watched person after person that keep coming around to the other side. So it's, again, interesting. I some of my other friends, I haven't lost any friendships because of it, put it that way, but I know people that have, that have gone to family members, because I tell them, I go, look, the first rule about Flat Club, I call it Flat Club, kind of like Fight Club, is that you don't talk about Flat Club. You do not walk up to somebody and say that the earth is flat. You will get the weirdest looks. But here's the part that bugs me. And again, this is part of the conditioning. I can talk to somebody for 15 minutes straight about the Truman Show, about how that could be possible. The second I say flat earth, their tone changes. Why does that happen? And that's because we all grew up with a globe in our classroom since we were 6 years old. You try to prove it's a globe, tell me how you know it's a globe. Do you know just because you remember ever since you were a kid to see the globe spinning in the classroom? Or do you know because you saw the one picture that NASA threw out in 1972 that they put all in all the textbooks?
But it also stands to reason that the things you look at in the sky, everything else is a sphere. So why would we be different?
Good point. But at the same time, how different is that from a planetarium? Planetarium, you're sitting on a flat surface inside a dome, but everything up as you see above you is a spherical object.
Well, why don't you think that those could be there, maybe beyond your dome? I mean, why do they have to be projections?
What you're talking about is the traditional geocentric model, which states that the Earth may be flat, or a globe, depending on which way you want to look at it, but that we'll say flat in this case, but that the solar system is very, very real and spins around us. That there's everything about the early thoughts about the universe were correct, that we were the center of the universe, but there was a giant, vast universe around us. And then I come back and I say, look, from a design standpoint, it's a waste of resources. And by that, and that sounds too easy or glib, but what I mean is that if you build it small, you don't have to build it. You're not gonna build big around it. You're just gonna fake big because you don't have to do it for real. Meaning, if 99.99% of the population believe that the planetarium is real, then why would you build a movie set that was bigger than that? You just don't spend the resources unless you have to. And it makes it more interesting anyway. Eventually a system like this holds a population for 5,000 years before they detect it, depending on how the technology goes. That's pretty good. And a lot of stuff has been accomplished then. But it's never going to last forever.
Well, you've said that you studied this for 9 months. Now, were you only looking at flat Earth, what I guess you would call research materials, or were you taking standard, generally accepted science into account as well? Because people have obviously devoted their lives to doing science, a lot longer than 9 months.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I've had people argue with me, and the indignant response is, you're telling me that Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking are wrong, and that their life's work was a complete crock. And I go, you're phrasing it wrong. what I'm basically saying is that Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein were brilliant men, no question. I mean, their math is exponentially higher than mine. But the foundation that their work was based on was flawed. It was extremely flawed. But they were the stuff they were based on, and that guy before them, and that guy before them, all the way back 500 years. They were doomed from the start. So, but when I was looking at everything. I tried to prove the globe. Trust me, people, I did not wake up one day and say, "Oh, flat Earth, that's a fantastic idea. I'm going to run with that. That's going to be my thing for 2015." No, I sat down and I said, because I problem solve for a living. I was like, okay, I should be able to prove a round Earth. And I tried and I looked at the math and I looked at the broad strokes, and I looked at the geocentric model, I looked at the concave model, I looked at the hollow Earth model, looked at everything I could, but everything kept pointing back to when I kept laying it out and saying, okay, if I was going to build a flat Earth and I was going to hide it, how would I do it? And as I went through the steps, that's, everything just started clicking, and I was going, I'll be darned.
Well, Mark,
because I couldn't prove on the design.
Mark, I'm going to zero in on the projection idea, whether they're holographic or just a light show that
Sure.
that they have set up there.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that out of the equation, I can tell you how we can prove that the Earth is curved and in fact spherical. Again, you have to take the projection idea out of it. The Earth casts a curved shadow on the moon.
That's what you got?
That's just it's one thing. It's one thing. And again, I also don't buy into the idea that the ISS is an elaborate hoax. I mean, I love looking at that footage. I don't think that's CGI. I don't think that's
all right. I can counter that with something, and people will have fun with this one. And I guarantee you haven't watched it yet. Or maybe you have. Look up, when you get a chance, on YouTube, or you can Google it, look up the term lunar waves. There was a guy, his name is Crow777. You can either type in Crow777 or CRROW777 into YouTube or Google, whatever you want. This guy took some HD footage, some really good. He basically hooked up a really great camera to a really great telescope, and he took some long-term footage of the moon. And one night, he runs into what can only be described as a lunar wave, which is a distortion wave which moved uniformly through the moon. And it's been replicated now at different parts of the world. But what was interesting was when I was looking at it, I knew from a gaming standpoint, I knew exactly what I was looking at. And it was a resolution issue. So what I mean by that is, if you remember the old movies where you take a movie camera, they don't do it anymore, and you took a picture of an old television set, and when you played it back, it looked like the television set was having a vertical hold issue. And that's because the refresh rate of the television was different than the refresh rate of the movie camera that was filming it. So it was out of sync. Mm-hmm. That's what you're seeing with the moon. When you look at his videos, I dare you, I challenge you, anybody, to watch this and then tell me what you think the moon is. Once you see that, you will question what exactly the moon is, because it appears that, it's a three-dimensional object, but it appears that there's something overlaid on top of it, that there's some sort of image that's on the top of it. So when it comes to what you were saying with a crescent moon or a blood moon or a half moon or whatever it is, they have to be, in a flat Earth model, they have to be fake, because there is no Earth between the sun and the moon. And once you watch these videos, you will understand why and how it's done. And it's very clever. And again, until recently, in fact, up until the last couple of years ago, the camera technology available was not there. You could never detect it with the naked eye or even a telescope. And again, why observatories have missed it all this time. It's only the digital camera technology over the last few years that is starting to show the cracks in this thing.
Okay, at the end of your YouTube videos, you have your email address, you have your phone number, you're getting feedback from all over the world. Have you had anybody in aviation, whether it's a pilot, somebody who works doing, I don't know, telemetry, as you say, or radar systems, has anybody who works in these fields, is what I'm asking, called you up and said, "Mark, let me set you straight on this or that"?
The only pilots that have contacted me were either retired or they were friends of friends who were actively flying. You got to remember that any pilot, and I stated this in one of the clues, any pilot that works for the commercial airline industry or the cargo industry, basically any pilot, Air Force, it doesn't really matter. Their careers are on the line here. So if they noticed anything wrong, especially in the southern hemisphere with fuel consumption or latitude and longitude or the GPS system, whatever it is, there are layers that they would have to get through to even come out about it. And what I tried to say was this. Imagine if you're a pilot and you notice something's wrong. First of all, most pilots now, because the GPS system came out in 1995, remember that's the Department of Defense system, run by the U.S. military. That system automatically runs the planes now. People just take off once in fact, they don't even have to get to cruising altitude anymore before they hit the autopilot. And sometimes they can do it right after takeoff. Most pilots don't even notice what's going on. All they care about is the same thing that the passengers do, and that is they want to get from point A to point B. If they notice there's something wrong with the fuel consumption or the route, or they look below and they see a landmass and it doesn't make sense to them, there's such a leap of faith that they would have to make to do it. Because if I had a checklist of 50 things that I thought it was, and I was a pilot, it wouldn't even be on that list. It would be it's so crazy that, again, why we're even talking about it, it's so crazy that a pilot would never make that leap. Because
I agree with you on that. Right. They wouldn't jump to fuel consumption seems a little sketchy. What the mileage doesn't really check out for whatever reason. Right. They're not going to jump to flat Earth. Yeah. But wouldn't you think they would report some anomaly?
You could.
I mean, one. If you're saying that this is basically happening with all these Southern Hemisphere flights, you're going to have more than a few pilots who are reporting this to their bosses.
But those guys are going to be watched more often than not. Those guys, if you're running this system, if you're keeping this under wraps, those guys, you're going to be monitoring every email, every memo, everything that's going on there, just to make sure. Even if they did make it to the second stage, which is, do you want to risk your career and go to what? Your department head, the FAA? Who are you going to go to talk about it? And I kind of joked about it, and I said, look, if a pilot even says the word UFO without laughing, he's benched. He's absolutely pilots. I know so many freaking pilots over the years that have said that they have said they won't say it on record, of course, but it's like, oh yeah, there's absolutely strange stuff up there, but I'll never go on record and say it because their career is over.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
This is even worse than that. Forget about UFOs. UFOs is actually pretty tame by comparison. You might as well, I joked in the end of the video, I said, you might as well be that Japanese pilot in 1986 that said he was followed by a massive UFO over Alaska. That guy was benched because as soon as he hit the ground, he was talking to people. And he was given a desk job and an early retirement once he got back to Japan. These guys are watched, no question. The same thing with astronomers. You want to see weird stuff? Look at and people think it's tied to Planet X, but look at the astronomers that have died over the last 10, 15 years. Astronomy technology has gotten better. I've got a completely different take on that now, and that is, I think that again the technology that we have now is accelerating so quickly that the detection of where we live and the system that we live. Can it detect a Truman Show? Yeah, I think people are slowly but surely finding out. They're trying to plug the leaks where they can, and it's a losing battle.
It's interesting because I'm actually willing to accept if somebody was able to throw proof at me that we live in a matrix system. If I was plugged in somewhere and everything that I experience on a day-to-day basis, everything I know to be reality is actually everything I experience through my five senses is really just the right electrical impulses sent through my brain to generate whatever effect. I could accept that because, and you know what? Well, it's scary as hell. It's scary as hell, but I also can't really disprove it.
Think of it. I got a different one for you. It's different than the Matrix. It predates the Matrix, and that is the Star Trek Next Generation holodeck. And that is, if the holodeck was big enough, you're still a real person. You're not plugged into a system. It's not just electrical impulses. But the point is that the holodeck has barriers. It's got, it's a big square. It's actually not a sphere in the holodeck. But, I believe that as much as I would the Matrix.
All right. I want to ask you then about private space.
Sure.
You've got Elon Musk. You've got Richard Branson. When they get up there,
yeah.
I mean, are they going to be, knocked back down by this dome, or are they never going to get all the way up there, or are there going to be disasters, or are they going to be sort of brought into the fold by NASA and whoever else, and are they going to be told basically the story, and they're going to have to toe the line?
All of the above. The private space program was delayed as long as possible. And for those of you who want to have, again, some fun, look up Virgin Galactic and SpaceX, all the different delays and explosions. I mean, heck, they had a rocket just disintegrate, didn't even get up that high, 3 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. Those programs were delayed as long as they could. However, if you're persistent enough, because I do believe the SpaceX program was recently credited with apparently delivering some sort of supplies to the ISS, you're going to fold them in at the highest level. But if you think that it's all, there's too many people involved, and at that point you've got the private program, you also got to realize that there's a group out there that controls just about everything when it comes to the trajectory and telemetry. In fact, I talked to a rocket program that was part of the challenge. They're in the race with SpaceX as far as the whole moon thing. I think it was called interorbital. And I was on a conference call with those guys, with another guy from Germany, and I was asking him. I was going, okay, because I knew part of the question in advance, and I said, look, who do you have to register with before you send anything up there? I go, do you have to register with NASA? I go, no, we don't have to talk to NASA at all before going up there. I go, really? I go, well, you got to file something with somebody. They go, yeah, we have to file with the AST. And I go, who the heck are those guys? And they go, it's the Aeronautical and Space Transportation Board. So basically, if you're going to do any sort of rocket program whatsoever, you have to let these guys know, basically the U.S. government and their equivalent in other companies, but they're all tied together, the European Space Agency and JAXA and all the others. You have to let them know months in advance exactly what you're going to do, including you basically give them all your telemetry ahead of time and tell them exactly what the payload and what the communications device and what it's going to do. I'm going, well, that's perfect. That's exactly what you would want to do, because that way someone like Interorbital would be completely off the hook. They send the rocket up. You can fake whatever you want from those guys, and no one's going to be the wiser. Again, no different than the movie Capricorn 1, where once the rocket got up to a certain point, the computers just simulated. Remember, this was in the 70s. Computers just simulated the telemetry and told the people on the ground exactly what they wanted to see. And, so SpaceX, absolutely in the fold. Virgin Galactic, we'll see when they get up there. And even if they did, only the guys at the highest level would be told. Maybe the presidents, maybe not.
Well, that's the next thing I was going to ask. Heads of state, the president.
The president, the president of the United States is so many levels below real power that, I don't even know if they'd let him know. I'll give you a perfect story. It's kind of a digression, but you may like it. And that was Area 51 was built without Eisenhower's approval. And the story goes, and I love this story, where that once he found out about it, he was, and remember, this is Eisenhower, the last president with any real power. And he goes, I still have friends, that are generals. He goes, I'll march the First Army over there, and I will take a look for myself if I have to. And they let him in. So do heads of state need to know? Not necessarily. Do secret families know? Yeah, probably. But everyone's going to be real selfish about it. It's not something you're going to tell people, when they're at the mansion necessarily. You'd want to keep this thing as close to the vest as possible. Because why tell them? If it's not going to benefit you, you don't tell people. It's not like, somebody gets inaugurated as the president of Uruguay and has to be, it's like, oh yeah, let's tell him. No, you don't have to tell that guy. Tell only the people that have to be involved, which again is why, that and the indoctrination of children. Remember, people don't understand that this is the only conspiracy that is debunked to children. The only one. Children don't get talked about JFK or Pearl Harbor or any of that crap, or 9/11. No, but they get a globe put in their classroom, before they know what 1 + 1 is. The globe is sitting right there. Put that in somebody's head for 12 years, it's easy. It's very easy. And again, it doesn't matter how long you go through school because it starts, literally in your first year.
Yeah. All right. Well, good Lord. Mark Sargent, he's not selling anything.
Not selling anything.
There's no book that I'm aware of.
Nope.
TV deals?
Not yet. Not yet. If that changes, I'll let people know.
All right. Well, I guess they can keep up with you at enclosedworld.com. The videos are up there, and you can send Mark emails. You can send him cookies, or you can call him up if you want to argue with him in the middle of the night. And I'm actually very surprised that hasn't happened yet.
I got one drunk call, but I have no idea what he was saying. 3 a.m, it was a voicemail, and it was like, rah, 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 rah. What do you think about that? Click. I have no idea what he said.
If we had callers on tonight, I feel like there would have been one or two of those.
There always are. Always are.
All right, listen, thank you, Mark. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, my name is Steve Warner. That's going to close it out for tonight. We'll see you back here next week on a show called Dark City. You can find us online at darkcity.fm. I can't even imagine the emails that are going to come from this, but I'll forward them to you, Mark.
Thanks.
All right, good night.
77 WABC.